last time we introduced MySQL Server and MySQL Workbench, and we also went over how to install a sample database that we use in this tutorial, which is the class database. You're seeing actually a data model of the class database. So study the tables in the class database and what column in each of the table and how this table are related to each other through relationship via the primary key foreign key pair between the two tables. And in when using a database, depends on your role. You may get involved in design the database as a database designer or data modeler. You may manage the database from a technical viewpoint. That's the DBA, database administrator. You may write application program which use the database to store data such that data can be shared via the application program. It could be a website, it could be a mobile app, or traditional client server application. The end user who use the program that has been developed are really not directly interacting with the database. They're interacting with the database through the application program, and typically they don't even know what's the structure of the database. For this course, we're interested in the role of more advanced users who actually use query tool such as like MySQL Workbench that can interact with a database through the DBMS. In this case, the DBMS database management system is MySQL Server, and the tool is MySQL Workbench, which we introduced previously. So this type of user are more advanced users, and you really get to know SQL statement well when you use MySQL Workbench. So let's get started introducing the one of the so-called data manipulation language and the select statement, which is part of the so-called DBMS. And if you're thinking about how we manage data in the database, there are four operations. We call it CRUD: create, read, update, delete. Let's use employee as example. A new employee, you need to create a new entry in the employee table. You may need to update existing employees' record or delete some employee when they retired or resign, etc. Read is retrieving data from the database, and in SQL statement, the corresponding SQL statement corresponding to the CRUD, the full operation is insert, select, update, and delete. So select is for reading, and the insert is for create. Update and delete, it's the same name. So that's pretty straightforward. We're going to spend most of our time in introducing the use of select statement because that's the most complicated one, and it's also the one that we use most often when we interact with database directly. Okay. So select statement is how we retrieve data. But sometimes we use the term query. However, it depends on the system. Sometimes query could mean insert, update, and delete. But in the narrow sense, query means data retrieval, select or read only. You can save a select statement as a definition of a query as a view in a database, and later you can run a SQL statement against that view. It's a more advanced topic, which would cover later in this course. So this is kind of the formal select statement in SQL language, and which consists of several parts. We call it clauses. And you can say select. Okay, select is keyword. Select from, where, group by, having, order by, limit are the reserved word. Distinct is a reserved word. All is not a reserved word. All just means you could actually use something like asterisk, means I need all the column. That means all. And you can actually have a list of column, and here we call it projection list. This is from a relational algebra's viewpoint. You can select data from table or view, which we mentioned view a little bit. Don't worry, we're going to use table mostly in this tutorial. And the where clause is set the search or filtering criteria condition. And group by and having is much more advanced, which we will have a lecture on it. You can kind of group your data by certain column as a separate group, and then analyze the data, and having work with group by. So when you have having, you definitely have group by. We will discuss it later. It's actually a more advanced topic. You can sort the result of your select statement by using order by, which is sorting. You can sort it by several different columns, by the position of the column. And by default, this underline just means default is in ascending order. If you don't say A has C, if you want to sort it, say price from high to low, then you have to say order by price and DESC. Okay. You could, if you want, add limit, which is not part of the so-called big six. Okay. You can limit the number of rows to be returned. Sometimes you may have too many rows. You just want to see the first few to see what it looks like, and then you can use limit to make the retrieval a little more efficient. Okay, here the ascending, descending alphabetically from A to Z, descending from Z to A. And this table kind of reiterate what we just went over: select, from, where, order by. Those are the four clauses that we're going to discuss first in this lecture. We will leave group by and having in another session. Okay. And this is a much nicer infographics to show you what's going on. Definitely, if we actually look at the construct of the select statement, you definitely need to know what column or information you want to get out of the database, out of certain tables or tables. And you need to know where the data are stored, which table or tables that contain the data that you needed. Okay. Where is the filtering? So you define the condition, like price has to be greater than $50. And group by is to group row based on certain column. Could be a single column or multiple column. And then you can filter the group based on the condition. And by the way, group by typically work with aggregate function together, which we will also talk about it. And order by is sorting from A to Z or Z to A. And limit is restrict the number of rows to be returned, which is pretty straightforward. we don't use limit that much, but and sometimes we do need to use it. Okay. So select statement is definitely required. From clause is almost required in most of the case. There are exceptional case which we're not going to go there. Where is the condition filtering? So it's kind of search criteria to select certain row, not all the row. And in the where clause, you could have a subquery, which is much more advanced topic, which we're not going to go into it at all. And union operator is much more advanced topic, which we're also going to skip that for now. And just visually, just thinking about the select statement, assuming here this is our base table. The table contain data. We intentionally use a very small table, a table with very small data set. Okay. And so thinking about the select statement, to some extent, you are selecting certain column, like the ID name and hire day as the column that you would like to have. So that's your select clause. You don't want all the employees, let's say employees data or row to be retrieved. So you would set the criteria. For instance, here, I only want employee who work for the engineering department. That's the where clause. And so eventually you get a subset of this base table, which means certain row based on the criteria and certain column based on the select clause. Okay, the select clause and the where clause, that you get a subset of the original table. And once you get it, that's the result set. But we're not done yet. You could, okay, order or sort the result set based on your liking. For instance, we can sort it by salary. Although salary is not in this example selected, but you can still use it for the sorting. And certainly you can sort it by the hire day, okay? And we're just kind of using salary as an example. So, and in the from clause, you definitely need to have it. Let's assume this is the employee table. Then together, it's select ID, name, hire day from employee table, where department equal to engineering department. It's a string, so in single quote, that's how you match the department to the engineering department. And then you can sort the final result based on salary in descending order. Okay, this arrow is not part of the statement. Okay, so that's kind of how they work. Why they matter? Because a lot of time for database, we need to use the data. We spend so much money in creating the database, in acquiring the data, maintaining the data. The real value is using the data to help us to make informed decision. So select statement is here to help us to do that. And select is read-only, so it's pretty safe. You're not changing the data. And through that selection, filtering, sorting, or later aggregation, etc., we can ask question, business-related question, and put out the data to help us to make informed business decision. And select is the basic skill for other more advanced SQL statements such as join, subquery, etc. So So learning select is a very important first step. Okay. In Access, we're not teaching Access here, but in Access, you could um, use so-called query design, which I call it query painter, to decide which table do you want to use, and then you will select either a table or a query, which is view in MySQL. And then once you select the table, then you can decide what column you want to use and from which table and how you want the result to be sorted. And do you want the column to be displayed? Sometimes you use a column for, let's say, filtering, but you don't want to show it, like the salary we mentioned previously. The criteria is the where clause. Set the filtering criteria. Okay, and you basically do drag and drop in creating a SQL statement behind the scene. MySQL Workbench does not have this particular tool, but it's still very easy to use. And this drag and drop creates SQL statement behind the scene, but does not, and you can switch in Access to actually edit the SQL statement. Okay. Once again, we select the table. You can drag and drop or double click, and then you get the select clause, what column you want to see. And you can also set the criteria, which is over here, and also set the sorting order, which is order by in ascending or descending order. Okay, and this is how the kind of the GUI graphical user interface, this SQL painter corresponding to the SQL statement. I still showed this because kind of give you a visual to understand how everything kind of put together. And by the way, this is Access, not MySQL Workbench. Okay. And you can run it. Once you have it, you can run it. And if you want to see the SQL view, and you can switch and actually look at the SQL view. That's actually the SQL statement. You can still write SQL statement in Access. For those who use Access only, strongly encourage you to look at least the SQL view and learn the SQL language, because that's a very important skill. Okay, get back to our MySQL. I'm going to do less demonstration in MySQL Workbench, just because that saves a little bit more time. You should be familiar with how to use it. I will still occasionally do that. We're using that class database, and you need to set that class database to be the default database, and then you can actually start writing a SQL statement such as this and see what came out of it. Okay, you can run it. Why don't we just do that? Assuming you currently working on the Northwind database, it is better you clean up the SQL editor. And assuming you loaded the class database already, which we went over how to do that, there's a database creation SQL script file that's given to you. You load it up, you execute everything in there, and then you will get this class database. Sometimes you need to refresh, and then double click to make it as a default database, so that all your SQL statement from this point on will be against this class database. You can create a new tab here in the SQL editor, and then you can say select, okay, all the column from, it can be any table. Okay, so I have the class database. There's a list of table. Click this little triangle to see all of them. And then if you want to find out what's in the student table, click here. You can see all the column in the student table. And here you can type the student table name, but you can also make sure the cursor is here. You can also just double click on the name of the student. Let me show you. This is a little bit subtle. Okay, if you click here, if your cursor is not on top of the name of the table, if you click, they expand and contract. But if you click on the name while your cursor is here, double click, then the table name will come here. I believe it's double click. Yeah, it has to be double click. Okay, that's the trick. You double click, then the name come over. Okay, and we can run it. We can either one will work. Okay, in this case, because we have only a single SQL statement. Then we got the result of the SQL statement. You can expand this a little bit to see more of it. And the output show the effect of running the SQL statement. The green just means it run without any mistake. And the message here just say that 6-row return. But you have to see over here in the result grid here to see the actual data. Okay, and one of the student has certain column has no value. That is okay because that's allowed in the definition of this table. This all null, that's actually not any real row. It's actually for you to enter a new student's information if you want to. Okay, so don't confuse this all null with other row. Those are the column name, all of them. If you only want certain column, then you can modify this. You can say, I want, once again, you can double click instead of typing the column name, you can just double click. You do need to type like comma to separate that. You want the student name, double click, you get it. Okay. And if you want the students, say city, let me see whether this will work. I'll double click here. Yeah, you have to double click on the name of the column to get that column come over. Okay. And now if I run it, I get actually all the students' number, name, and city they live in. And for instance, I only want students who live in the Fairfax city, which is in Virginia, by the way. And then you can just say you need to add the where clause. We use all uppercase, where, and you can just say the city. I'll do double click, equal to Fairfax. This won't work. Okay, it's a string literal. You need to enclose and using single quote. And by the way, you see this red thing just means the current SQL statement is incorrect. Okay, and because we're missing a single quote. And once you've done that, then you know the SQL statement works fine. Let's run it without the single quote and see what happens. Okay, and you get an error message. Okay, The error message here, it's a little bit difficult to see. I'll click right mouse button right on top of it. I will just copy the response. Allow me to just paste the response here, so I don't have to switch to other places. You say you have an error in the SQL syntax. Check the menu. Let me see what they just check the menu corresponds to SQL Server. It they're not that smart. They just say it's near Fairfax. Okay, the line 2. So you kind of know the mistake is here. Okay. And by the way, um, if you encounter syntax error um, and don't know how to fix it, another way, I'll demonstrate it here for you. Bear with me. You can go to ChatGPT and just say, check statement for me. You can say check the syntax of the following SQL statement for me. They kind of know what's going on. And they basically say, well, you're missing a closing quote after Fairfax, okay? And so the large language model is pretty smart, better than MySQL Workbench. Eventually, some version of similar to like MySQL Workbench will have this kind of AI-powered feature to kind of check your syntax, okay? But here we go. So we can actually copy this, and we can come back here. Okay, don't forget delete this. We're just using the space to show the error message. And so now if you run it, it worked. Okay, that's a green 3-row return. So definitely when you run SQL select statement, usually you will get certain column based on your select clause, and then the row based on certain data in your table, and also the where clause, the search criteria that you put in place. And then this action output would also give you some indication whether it is done properly or something went wrong. Okay, but the error message, once again, it's not very good. Okay, so that's kind of how you use the SQL, MySQL Workbench. You can save this as a text file. You can just say save, and then you can save it as a file, external file, and then you can load it up if you want to. And the extension is .sql, so the system knows, so you don't have to type .sql, and it will be saved as a .sql statement. I may have one already. I'm going to override that. Okay, and then if you want, you can load it up. You can just say open. You go to download, and that test.sql. Now you have it. You can run it. So this, you can, any SQL statement you want to save, you can save it this way. Okay, that's MySQL Server. Okay, and you can use this from now on for the testing out a lot of select statement here. It works with the class database. Okay, and here we show null. In Oracle, they just show blank. Empty string is not the same as null, by the way. So this is better. Okay, the MySQL Workbench did it much better. You can select a certain column from, let's say, division table, and this is the result, and 5-row return. So you can test it out. I have this kind of traditional character-based output for comparison. Okay, they're pretty much the same. And once again, this now is actually, this asterisk just means you can actually insert new row here, I believe, although we don't typically do that against the result of a select statement. Here comes one thing that's important. The column that you select can be a column in your table, like an instructor table, but it could be a calculated column, an expression. For instance, here we're going to want to calculate the bonus, which is the salary of employee, minus 20K, and then times the result by 0.1, which is 10%. That will become, let's say, the end of the year bonus. Okay, and here, this is the expression, and bonus is what we call alias. Okay, the tentative name, column name, which doesn't exist in any table, and in this case, the result grid, the result set, we use this alias as a column name instead of using this expression as a column name, so which make much more sense. If the alias has special character like space in it, then you need to enclose it in, I believe, single quote will work. You can also use backtick, okay, in for the alias that has space in between, okay. And so what is alias? Because it is used quite often. Us, by the way, in SQL, us is optional. You don't have to say us, but I would do that because it makes the syntax much more clear. Okay, you can say select first name name, which means first name will be shown as name in the output. Okay, and it's also used you can also define alias for table. For instance, employee as E, and then if you need to prefix the column belong to the employee table, you can just say E dot first name, E dot salary to make a long table name much shorter. And in this case, it's a single table, so you don't really need a prefix at all. Okay. And so why we use alias? Simplify the query syntax, make the output much more clear, which we mentioned, shorten sometimes long name, which you may need to use several times, and also avoid ambiguity in terms of when you're particularly retrieving columns from two tables that have the same column name. So you need to have the table prefix to identify which column in which table you're referring to. For instance, we haven't covered join, but just bear with me. I need data from the employee table and department table. And then the reason I can combine data from the two tables is they share a common column, primary key, foreign key pair as a relationship. So the column is, in this case, both, it's called department ID in both tables. So I need to actually prefix it with the table name to indicate which table it came from. And employee and department table name, you can use it directly here instead of E and D, but here, that's the alias. I can just say this is actually employee.department ID equal to departments.department ID, okay, to abbreviate it. And here I can also use the alias of the two table to prefix the corresponding column name. Okay. So that will work. So sometimes you will see some people like to do this prefixing with alias. Okay. So it's kind of like a nickname to make the SQL a little abbreviated. Criteria, where clause. Okay. Um, in this case, we want last name, middle name, and first name from the instructor table, where div, by the way, is the division the instructor worked for. And then here we want to retrieve instructor who worked for department 020. It's a string, so enclosed in single quote. Here you're seeing actually a backtick for div. Okay, in MySQL server and MySQL Workbench, for that matter, this is required because div in MySQL server, it is a reserved keyword, which means you can still use a reserved keyword as a column name or even table name, but whenever you refer to the name, you have to enclose with backtick. Okay, so the best practice is avoid using the any reserved word in MySQL server to name your table or column. But our database has it. I did not change it, so so we have to use this backtick. Okay, that's kind of special case. Okay, so just be aware. You can try without the backtick and see what happens. This may work in other database system without the backtick. I know if it's in Access, it actually works because div is not a reserved word in Microsoft Access. And you can actually use null in your where clause. And here we try to retrieve student with the student number in the name where the address is null, which means students don't have address. And how could it happen? It could be someone just, let's say international student, they just arrive and reporting at school, and we establish the record and we say, where do you stay? And you say, well, I live in a hotel right now. I haven't found an apartment to stay, or I haven't checked into the dormitory. So you probably don't want to use their hotel address as the address because that's going to change in a day or two. So you will set their address as null. But later you may want to go over the student's table and then put out student whose address is still null, and then ask them where they actually live. Okay, so this could be a useful SQL select statement. And we have only one student, James, who doesn't have an address yet. So null is a reserved word, by the way. Null means, we mentioned last time, just means I don't know. You haven't told me what's the value for this particular row for this column. If you have a datetime column here, like date of hire, the day the employee got hired, and then you know the reason we record this because we know how many years that the employee has worked for us. In MySQL server, you use the ISO standard format for name. So this is the year 1990 hyphen 01 means the month, and then followed by the date. Okay, so this is the format. It's pretty standard, unlike the it's not the kind of US standard. Um, and so you need to be aware of it. In Oracle, um, that's how you write it. In Access, that's how you write it. We treat the day as a string, but you have to use specific format. And so here we still need single quote to enclose the day. Access use pound sign. In where clause, because it's a filtering, so we have you can use a number of comparison operator or relational operator, equal, not equal. There's two ways to write it: greater, less than sign, greater equal sign, less equal sign, between. Okay, it's inclusive. So if you say the educational level is between 10 and 20, which means include 10 and 20 and anything in between. You can also use something called not between. So in this case, I think does not include 10 and 20. Okay, it has to be 9 or less and 21 or greater. Okay, so this is the result that we have here. And then you can use the, if you have multiple kind of criteria, then you can use and or to combine the criteria. For instance, date of hire has to be less than 1990, end of 1990, and the salary is less than 26K. So maybe you're checking and say, hey, who has to work for us for that many years and still make very little salary? Maybe they deserve a raise. Okay. This is in Access how you specify it. We're not going to discuss it. Run it and you get the answer. Okay. And or called logical operator. The parenthesis, which we're going to see later, it's for grouping, which is changing the order of precedence in evaluation. You can use or. Okay, so if this is true or this is true, then you will select the row. Okay, doesn't have to be both to be true. This is Boolean algebra, a Boolean expression. You can use parentheses such that this will be evaluated together. So this has to be true, and this has to be true for this criteria to be true. Okay. So now we introduce comparison operator, between, not between, also called range operator, and logical operator, which is and or. Not really logical, but it can go along with and or if necessary. And the grouping, the parentheses change the order of evaluation, changing the precedence of the evaluation. So we can use not. I don't particularly like not. Sometimes it works really well, but in this case, we can technically just say that the DID is greater than D010 instead of say not less than or equal to D010. Okay, so if you could avoid using not, you may want to avoid it because it's kind of take the extra step to understand what it is. But in some situations, not really work well. So not is used before a condition. This is a condition or expression. Like work with string. In MySQL, it's called char, char, or varchar variable character. And it doesn't work with numerical column or datetime column. And this, I call it wildcard search. And so for instance, here, I select name and city from student table, where the city like fair %sign, which means I would like to retrieve students' name and the city they live in. For those students, the city um, they live start with fair. Okay, in this situation, any city name start with fair will match this criteria and will be selected. So it could be fair by itself, nothing else, it match. It could be 0 or more character after fair will match. So Fairfax will match. Fairland will match. Fair space land will match. Okay. So that's the wildcard search. So like, okay, reservoir. You can also use underscore. If you use underscore, like 3 underscore, then the city name has to start with, in this case, fair, followed by 3 more characters. You don't care about what are the 3 characters, but it has to be 3 characters. So if you have a city called Fair Lake, it would not match. Although it match fair, but lake is 4 character long. So it doesn't match in this case, but it match in this case. Okay. So that's this can be very powerful because a lot of time we only remember partial string of certain column, but we do want to search based on that information. Then this can be very, very useful. Okay. So do remember the use of like for string data type column. And this is also called fuzzy search, okay, using like. And there are different way to use it. For instance, start with A in this case, end with SON, or you have a string that somewhere has OR in it. It could be at the very beginning, can be at the very end, or can be somewhere in between. You don't care as long as it has OR in it. That's fine. Okay. And if you have something like this, which is start with an S, can have 0 or many character in between and end it with an N. That's what I mean. Okay. This is for the single space sign underscore, 1 character, so you don't care, but it's just anything start with an N with any character followed by N and D. Okay, that's what we have. You can combine them, so it could be it match a string. You don't care what's the first character, and the second character has to be R, and then followed by 0 or many character. Then that will match. The string that we use for comparison, it's not case sensitive. Okay, so we don't care about the upper lower case in when we use like. Between can be between 2 number, but you can use string. But you need to be very careful that the sorting sequence of a string, so you use it properly. And here we actually name our department ID nicely, such that we can use this. Okay, and so in this case, you want department which is between department 10 and department 30, so it show up properly. And by the way, this is not part of the SQL statement. This means you can write this SQL statement as where clause by using this. Okay. If you compare the two, this using between is much easier to understand. Okay, comparing to the using the greater, less than, and or whatsoever. Not between, it's even more difficult. If you equal to this, this is even more difficult to understand. But in this case, not between is still relatively easy to understand, which means you want to find instructor by retrieving their instructor number and salary, where their salary is less than 30K and or um, less than 30K or greater than 50K. Okay, so this is, if you think about it, it's could be quite confusing. Okay, but that's what that's why I always say that I don't particularly like not, because that take extra step in thinking it through. But sometimes it worked. Sorting. Okay, sorting is just you retrieve certain column, certain row from the table, put out their column based on certain filtering criteria in the where clause, and then you can decide how you want the result set, okay, to be sorted. And in SQL, it is called order by, not sort by. Okay, and it can be sorted in ascending order, which is the default, or descending order. Ascending, thinking about price wise, it's low to high. Descending, if it's a price, then it's high to low. Okay, so here it's order by the department ID, so it shows up department ID. If you run this SQL select statement without this order by, it may actually sort it by the department ID, most likely. But don't count on it just because it's by the department ID. There's no guarantee. Technically, there's no guarantee. So if you really want the result grid to show up sorted in a certain order, use order by yourself. Okay. And okay, so you could sort it or order by multiple column, okay, like educational level in descending order, and then by the last name, okay. So which means that if there's a tie, if two or more employee has the same educational level, then you're going to break the tie by listing based on their last name in ascending order. Okay. And the last name here, you can replace it with the column position. This is the first column, second, and third column. Then you can use the column position in the order by, which is not recommended. Okay, we prefer that you use the column name in order by, if all possible. Okay, because that make if you use the column position in order by, it's more difficult to maintain your code, because sometimes you may change the column or the arrangement of the column, then you're changing the column position. If you forgot to revise this, then you're going to get something not exactly what you wanted. Okay, and you can sort by expression, a calculated column by its expression. At least in MySQL Server, this is possible. Okay, but it's probably better that you if that's used in your select clause, you may want to give it an alias and then use the alias to indicate the sorting order. Okay, null value is considered smallest in terms of sorting. So they would actually show up first. If you sort it by certain column which has a null value, it will show up first. Okay. So this is once again descending, ascending. If it's ascending, you don't have to say it. If it's descending, then um, you have to describe it. So in this case, actually the result is not. Let's take a look. Okay. In this case, this result is in. Oh, by the way, this is correct because we're sorting it by the department ID in descending order. So this is actually in descending order. Okay, I was looking at the DIR, which is the instructor's number, which is employee number to some extent, who serve as a director or manager of the department. And if you sort it by DIR, then you can just say order by DIR. And then if you want it to be ascending, you don't have to say it. It will be ascending. Okay. Why don't we do that? Let's just try this one. You can, if you want to keep this, you can keep it. You can open a new tab. Then you run this. And by the way, we could, where is it? There's a reformatting. Okay, this icon on the toolbar, like a brush, you highlight your SQL statement, and then they reformat it with kind of their preferred format, which make your SQL statement looks more structured because we can see it clearly different clause, like select certain column from the division and order by the column we use for sorting, and we end the statement with semicolon. So we can just run it, then we get the result. If I need to change this, I can just change it to DIR. Run it. We get this. Okay. And here it happened the DID is actually listed in ascending order. But if you want it to be in descending order, then you can just say by DIR and DID in descending order, DESC. Okay, this is in ascending order. There's a tie. Okay, if it's a tie without this DID, and then they would list it in whatever internal order that's they choose. But if you really want it to be in specific column to break the tie, like the DID in descending order, then you specify the second column in order by. So let's look at it. So that's in descending order to kind of break the tie. Okay. So that's pretty cool. You can use column name, column position in order by. Once again, we don't recommend it, but you can use it. Okay. And limit, it's not part of the big six in terms of SQL clauses, but at the very end in your SQL statement, you can add limit, which means only return true row. Okay, and if you use limit along with order by, it achieves the result of, for instance, in this case, we're retrieving instructor's name and salary, and you order by salary in descending order, which means higher salary to the lowest salary. If you limit to, which means we're only seeing the first two employee, since it's sorted by salary, which means we want to see the employee, the top two employee that make the most salary. Okay, so it's equivalent of something we call the top n. N is 2 here. If you sort it in ascending order, low salary to higher salary, and you limit by 2, 3, 4, let's say 2 here, then you retrieve the bottom 2 employee who has the lowest salary. Okay. So in Microsoft Access, actually, you use something called top n or bottom n to do this. But in MySQL, PostgreSQL, we use limit. Okay, so limit is a reserved world. Okay. Oracle use something called first or last n. N is just an integer. First or last n row only. So just as example here, although SQL language is a standard, but the implementation of the SQL in different database management systems are slightly different, so they're not fully compatible. But the differences are kind of minor, and you try to use the SQL based on the standard as much as you can to make your code more portable, compatible. Okay. So just once again, we're inserting a new row. This is an insert statement. We haven't talked about insert statement, but we're inserting a new employee, which is Bob Smith, making 60K. And that's the corresponding column, and this is the value. And if it's string, it's a single quote. If it's number, you don't need to have quote, like 60 or 60,000 here. And once you have that, and by the way, if you run this in MySQL Workbench, you're not going to see the result grid. They just say one row has been affected. Okay, don't panic. And then you run the following select statement, and you will see Bob Smith showing up. Okay. The reason we insert this record is because we want to show you the multiple sorting order by. Okay, first bonus. Bonus is an expression. We create alias. We can use the alias in order by in descending order. So this, we got a tie. Then we have a second order by column, which is last name. Then last name, it will be listed in ascending order. Smith, S, there's a tie, but N come before T, so Smith show up first. Okay, that's how it worked. In Access, actually, if you want to specify something like this, it's a little bit tricky, and this is kind of the reason we although the SQL painter like this is useful and user friendly, but situation like this, it's a little bit tricky. I'm not going to explain this. It can be done, but it has to be done in a very tricky way. Let's just put it that way. Okay. So this is just an example. I have two statements. You execute one at a time. When you execute the first, nothing show up here. Okay, you only see like one row effective, which means I insert one row correctly. There's no visual feedback. And then when you run the select statement, then you get the result. Okay, they say 5-row return. Without this insert in the first place, you probably would get 4-row instead of 5-row. Okay. You can use position. We mentioned that again and again, and um, you could use expression directly. I don't particularly like this, so I would use alias. I would define the alias and then use it here, salary, like what we have done previously. And we can use string concatenation function to concatenate, let's say, last name, first name, and even middle name. In MySQL, we use string concatenation, comma, space, okay, comma, space character. This if null, um, let's say, um, if it's false, I think then we return the middle name. Otherwise, we return nothing. This is actually two single quote, not a space in between. So this is a more advanced function. Otherwise, the system may return null. This is how you want to avoid that. Okay, let's give it a try and see. Let's discard this. I'm going to reuse this space. Okay, so this is fine. And then let's see if I don't have this. I'm not sure when they'll have a middle name, which is null. Okay, and okay, so this is fine. They're not showing null, so that if null may not be necessary. Let's look at the students. I'm going to use this table data. So I do have hold on a second. I do have Jan. Oh, it's instructor. Oh, actually, all the okay, everybody has middle names, so whether you have that if null or not doesn't matter. Let me just add something very quickly for the sake of testing. Let me just keep the middle name now, and then I'm going to just do it such as this, D010. I'll leave the rest blank. And let's see what happened. Okay. Oops, sorry. I insert this, I actually have to say apply to make it in effect. Okay, need to have a default value. So unfortunately, the definition of the table requires this to have a default value. Let me see when I can change that quickly. middle name, let's assume could can be not doesn't have to be not null, which middle name can be null. Okay, you deselect that. Let me apply. So I'm actually changing the definition of this student table. Now, if I come here in the, where am I? I'm here. Now, see when I can insert it. There's a change apply, so I think I'm okay. So if I come back to this, run it. Instructors, let me double check. Okay, I did apply it, and then yeah. Okay, so it looks like although it is this new employee has a null middle name, and when I select concatenate first name with middle name, when it's null, they're actually in concatenation. They actually do not show. Oh, I see. Aha. There is a null here, which means it may end up. Let me see let me get this one over so we can make comparison. Let me highlight this and then run it. Aha, so it does matter. Okay, with this one, actually this new employees data will not be displayed at all. They just say no, because no sometimes complicate things in some of your expression. In this case, they just turn everything null. And so we still need this if null to deal with the situation when the middle name is null, such that it will return an empty character, okay, to be concatenated, such as here. Okay, so that's a little bit complicated. Just the lesson learned here is that if something shouldn't be null, and then define it in the column definition first in the first place. So let's continue. You can use in. We have that between. In and between kind of similar, but the difference here is between D010 and D040, and that would include D020, D030. But in, we specifically choose whatever in this list, which is the department 10, 20, and 40 would show up. It's more specific. And this certainly is can be quite useful. And you can also use not in, and you can use expression in the condition. Okay, so we will stop here. When we come back, we'll talk about insert, update, and delete. So see you next time.